Okay, in early June of 1975, there was a railroad enthusiast-sponsored fan trip. I guess you'd call it a rare mileage fan trip over what remained of the Claremont and Concord Railroad. That was a Sam Pinsley-owned short line that was the part of the former B&M Claremont branch between Claremont Junction and Concord, New Hampshire. It's about 50 miles. At the time, the only part that remained was between Claremont Junction and Newport, which is the next town over from Claremont, maybe 10 miles or so. And this was like I say, it was a rare mileage trip featuring two of the railroad's 44-tonners. I think that's all they had actually on the roster at the time. They're little GE locomotives that were very common on short lines and small switching operations. And the accommodation, the cars that we rode in, were gondolas with folding chairs. I think there was a box lunch kicked in there as well, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it was a meager thing, and it's a Railfan thing. It's sort of, in many ways, it harkened back to the early days of railroad enthusiast trips, like on the Hoosick Tunnel of Wilmington and so on. So it was kind of fun. Anyhow, my friend Scott Whitney is a native of Claremont, and so we went up and hung out there for the night before, actually trackside, and then the next morning, exhausted, of course, we went and rode the excursion. There were probably, I'll say 150 to 200 people that were riding that day, and it was a good trip. It was, like I said, the day was kind of mixed. It was overcast. We had a little bit of rain and then some sun. When we got over to the junction, as the other rail fans started showing up, there was a gathering over near this little yard that's just east of the junction, and they were gathering there, and that's where the train was set up. And the B&M's Con River line, of course, runs through Claremont Junction, and which is across the road from where the yard is. And all of a sudden, we're over there, and we hear the grade crossing flashes going down or whatever. And anyway, someone yells, "Train!" There was a northbound freight that was going through. I think it was SJ1. Anyway, so everybody went running en masse, and you have to imagine, 100 or 150 people running across this road with cameras, getting the cameras out and everything else, and trying to set up in a photo line to get this train coming by, because it's a Railfan thing. And so anyway, that's where this starts. And you can see here again the burn on the left, the sunburn, light burn, whatever, from the thing. But from my neophyte camera skills, these regular rate things were a little bit of a challenge for me to run. Anyway, here comes the freight, and let's see, he's going. Yeah, it's a B&M job. I'm pretty sure it was SJ1. That was the normal morning freight through there, and he's heading up to White River Junction. This is going northbound, and let's see, he went through, and then with the caboose following. It was kind of neat to see caboose back then, and then we got on the trip. That's the end of a 44-tonner. There we go. These are, like I say, they're small yard switching engines, and those 44-tonners, as my friend Jerry was wont to remark, weigh 88,000 pounds. So we went along between Claremont Junction and downtown Claremont. This part of the line still remains today and is actually still operated. They haul in mostly salt, road salt, to Claremont, where it's offloaded for the New Hampshire DOT or whatever trucks and stuff to use in the wintertime. And I think that constitutes most of the railroad's business right now. That, and I think some lumber to LaValley Lumber, which is a local thing. This is the switch that goes off the Claremont branch and runs down to a small, what was at one time an electric yard. There was overhead catenary over this track, and there was an electric railway that went down all the little side streets and stuff in Claremont and served a number of industries. There were several paper mills. There was foundries that were owned by Joy Manufacturing and other companies. There was a lot of manufacturing in Claremont at the time, and it was served by rail. My friend Scott has written extensively. He's researched extensively all of this operation, and he's had several articles published and so on. It's really his thing. You just saw the train, the extent of the train going through what remained of Claremont Yard, and we're crossing, I think, Broad Street here. This is Scott's, like I say, his backyard. We're going along over one of the bridges over the Sugar River. The Sugar River runs from Newport down to through Claremont, and it empties into the Connecticut at West Claremont. And among the features of the trip and of the line at the time were a couple of covered bridges that were two of only several remaining in service in New Hampshire for Common Carrier Railroad. This and there was one at North Newport and I think one at Kellyville. And so that was, as I say, it was a feature of the trip. And so they had a little photo run by, and that's what all these people are standing in front of the train doing. There's Joe LaRusso in the red jacket. And they were all getting their pictures of the train coming through. And then we all got back on the train and proceeded along the Sugar River a little further through North Newport and into Kellyville, I guess, or whatever, and eventually over into Newport. I'm a little messed up on the exact syntax of towns at this point. I haven't got a timetable in front of me. Scott knows this like the back of his hand. And then we proceeded through the next covered bridge, and let's see. Yeah, you can see all the Railfans in there getting their pictures. This was, I think, the last excursion that was operated over the line as to its extent at that time. And it ran, like I say, all the way to Newport, which was about 10 miles. It took about 2 hours to do the trip. You can barely make out the white flags in the locomotive indicating that it's an extra move. And then I start to get that light burn at the end of the roll again, but we won't talk about that now. Anyhow, they're fleeting photos or fleeting images of a now long gone operation that I'm really glad I was able to